Um, I have to say that I'm happy to present our second speaker of the series that was designed just for you. So I'm glad that you were able to join us. As you know, this is heralding sort of the startup of the new graduate programs here that deal mostly with issues of process of transformation in the urban realm, and that we're trying to redefine into critical practices in the city. Today we have Paula Z. What does the Z stand for? Zeslowski Zagal, right? Where I think it's not common in a design school, at least to my perception, to have lawyers speak to us. But she has a very interesting practice, a non-profit organization. She runs a non-profit organization called 596 Acres, 596 Acres. How do you use 596 Acres? Which deals with public advocacy and consciousness and relationship of space in the city, right? I mean, it's a very diverse, she will tell us about it. She also runs a lot of activist-related practices, got very involved with Occupy Wall Street, and trying to understand in New York the construction of public space and the way that public space has been somehow taken over by bureaucracies and by law enforcement, contrary to how the laws were inscribed in them. So she will talk a lot about that too. She also started this initiative with several partners that's called Who Owns Space, right? I assume that the hash means Twitter, or yeah? Okay.
I don't know much about Twitter, but
okay,
but it
wow.
works.
Yeah, something in there. And I found this it would be incredibly interesting because it's a very different perspective on how to practice in the city and design the city in a way through law, through law. So I want to welcome Paula. Thank you very much. You have the table, and you can talk as much as you want, and then we'll ask some questions. Thanks.
Hi. So I'm in a second going to play a video of myself talking, because that's always a good way to start, get some things out of the way. But what I'm actually going to do is talk about tactics, a whole bunch of different kinds of tactics that have been, does that sound okay? That have been used to address different types of problems. And then at the end, maybe we'll wrap it up and open up a conversation about sort of why these tactics, why these problems. And I would love to have that conversation be an open conversation with you guys. So, here we go. Me talking. human mic is one that it's very hard to get used to, actually. It's actually, you can screw it up really easily, and it's quite difficult. This direct action was based on the zoning laws, which say that if you're going to have a publicly owned private space and you're going to get the bonuses, which allow you to build bigger, or sometimes allow you to put your building slightly in a different place than you would have to under the zoning laws, then you're going to have to comply with some rules that make the space that you are providing for the public open. Those rules are incredibly prescriptive. They are based on some public plazas. One of them is the Seagram's building, another one is the Chase Manhattan Plaza, which we'll talk about in a minute, that were built in the early 1960s, that were built by designers who were experimenting with how to make people feel welcome in the city at a time when a lot of people were leaving the city because it didn't feel like a welcoming place. Those plazas worked. People hung out in them. There's great archival footage of just, planners and sociologists just sitting there with a camera watching the plaza to see what people would do in it, and people hung out. People made those spaces work. So the City Planning Commission decided to codify that and to come up with these rules based on these working plazas about what makes great plazas in the city. One of the things that makes a great plaza in the city, according to the zoning resolution, is they have to be unobstructed. The space between the sidewalk and the plaza, at least 50% of it, has to be empty. We had these barricades surrounding Liberty Plaza that went all the way around. The only way into Liberty Plaza between November 15th and January 10th were these two openings where the obstruction actually wasn't broken. The barricades were just spaced like this. So it was actually 100% obstruction all the way around the plaza. Clear violation, totally boring, right? The unobstructedness of the plaza is not what makes it a working public space. And if you had come to this space sometime in midsummer and to check out whether it was a working public space, probably at lunchtime you'd see a bunch of people having lunch. Maybe by mid-afternoon it would be completely empty. You see these lovely trees, some nice design, not a lot of life. People moved into that space, they created life there, and we were able to use the zoning resolution to sort of defensively then protect that experience of a public civic life in New York City. The barricades are down. There's a potential for that life to emerge in this space again, though if you go back down there, after this talk or tomorrow morning, it's pretty empty. It's pretty dead. The zoning, even though now they're complying with zoning, we got what we wanted. We got the barricades down. That was a great victory. That night in the plaza felt awesome. It was incredible. It was a nice night. There were a lot of people who were actually in buildings downtown who were having meetings, and people came to the park. I actually got to see the last of the barricades come down. So we won, but the space is empty, right? So there's a question of how do you create a public space? And the zoning resolution, though it's a good tool and a good tactic, isn't really doing it. But this is one of the tools we use to orchestrate the direct action that I described in the video. Is we put up a web campaign where we illustrated the zoning resolution, illustrated the violations, illustrated how those barricades exactly are violating the law, and then we got people to. There's a nice online form on nyc.gov where you can complain to any commissioner. We can get people to complain to the Commissioner of Buildings. They give you 150 words in the box. That is exactly 150 words. I give you a moment, but I think you have a sense of what that says. We got about 100 people to send in their complaints. We set up an email account. We were tracking people's complaints. So as people would send them in, nyc.gov has a kind of 75% chance of sending you a receipt. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. But in cases where they did, we were tracking those receipts and sort of setting up for future appeals, setting up for knowing what the city had done in response to its citizen actions. The Department of Buildings is required to follow up on every single complaint. The Department of Buildings is in charge of things like falling elevators. and roofs that collapse. They are charged with making sure that city buildings are safe, and part of that is that they comply with zoning. So we were sort of using that system and demonstrating to the Department of Buildings and anybody else who was watching us that we were using it in a really regimented way by tracking what people were actually, the communications people were actually having with the city. That was Liberty Plaza. I think that's what led to the Village Voice article that got Miguel to invite me to come here. This is Chase Manhattan Plaza. As I said, Chase Manhattan Plaza was one of these plazas that was designed in the early 60s. This was a time when architects were trying to make the city feel better for people who had to work in it. Everybody wanted to be out in the suburbs. The city was the last place anybody wanted to be. And so the Chase Manhattan building got a front lawn. That is the language that is in a lot of different architectural materials, actually, including the document through which the New York City Landmarks Commission declared this plaza a landmark. It's a landmark because it is a front lawn for the financial district. On September 16th, 2011, in anticipation of the General Assembly that was called there for the next day, Chase Manhattan put up these fences. They've been up ever since. They're up now. So for the last 4.5 months, the space that has been designated a landmark because it serves its purpose of being a front lawn and breathing space in the financial district has been closed. It is a private space. It's a space that Chase did not have to build, but they built it over 50 years ago, and it has been open to the public for 50 years. One of the things that's in it is a sculpture by Isamu Noguchi that we can't see because we can't get to it. It's actually a sunken garden that you can only get to if you're in the middle of the plaza. So this was Chase being clearly scared of people showing up at their plaza wanting to talk to each other, right? Being clearly scared of a civic life manifesting itself on their front steps. And when I actually went down there with a reporter, sometime in late January, on a really cold, drizzly day, I was told by a security guard that the reason the plaza was closed was because of Occupy Wall Street. Which is kind of amazing because there was, Occupy Wall Street is an idea. And there was nobody in downtown Manhattan, and everybody who maybe is, thinks of themselves as part of Occupy Wall Street, they were somewhere warmer and nicer than that plaza on that particular Thursday afternoon. But the plaza was closed, and the security guard actually said, the bank is a target. People like you are a threat. I said, whoa, okay, that's cool. It's weird, but that's cool. So Chase Manhattan, as I said, so we read the landmarks designation report. We couldn't go to Department of Buildings in this case because it's a private space. There's a private space, it's purely private, it's not governed by the zoning resolution. It was built before the zoning resolution was written. It was built at the architect's choice, but it turns out it's a landmark. Landmarks designation report talks in this beautiful language about the plaza and about the sculpture and about all the benefits of this space to New York City. And of course, this is the same space that has been closed for over 4 months. So we got people to complain about it. Landmarks is quaint. You can email their commissioner, but we thought we'd be friendly and we would use their actual mechanism for complaining about violations of landmarked buildings, and their actual mechanism is this form that you fill out and mail by hand to their office. They don't have an email, which is cute. So we did this. It's cute, they're landmarks. It's fine. We actually went down there one day, sent a couple people down there one day when there was an action by the Legal Services Union targeting somebody whose office happens to be in the Chase Manhattan building. And so, of course, they were trying to protest, but what they were met with. They were not Occupy Wall Street, they were the Legal Services Union. And so we got a bunch of those people to fill out sweet little notes to the Landmarks Commission that say, there are fences. Oh my God. So Landmarks Commission got a bunch of these notes. Here's some more sort of technical, precise pictures of these fences. So it seems what we've learned in this process is that Chase Manhattan has some good lawyers. Who knew? See how the fences are not attached? They're held down with sandbags and guards. There are other ways of, making sure the fences stay there. They actually didn't bolt them in place. The Landmarks Commission claims, so the Landmarks Commission's response to all of our little handwritten notes was, oh, this fence doesn't affect the landmark. We only look at things that are attached. That's not true. The Landmarks Commission is charged with regulating anything that affects the historic nature of landmarked buildings. So then we got back to that little nyc.gov form. We picked the Landmarks commissioner instead of the Department of Buildings this time around. This is 150 words. I'll give you a second. I was watching you. Who owns space is the part. What I've been talking about we in this context. Who owns space is actually a collaboration between 6 different, very specific groups that are all will sort of share an ethos but have different tactics. And the Occupy DOB, Occupy Landmarks campaigns have been campaigns that I've been running with a lot of support, with a lot of design support from design agency, with tactical support from the public school, and with all of us sharing our networks and our social networks and getting the word out that way. 596 Acres is a project that I run, which is my excuse for knowing all about these funny little intricacies of city agencies and how to leverage them against each other and where the nyc.gov forms are. I'm gonna play you another movie. Are we doing okay?
Yeah.
Yeah?
This is our interactive map. Green dots on the map are publicly owned vacant lots. Green dots with yellow around them are places where people are starting projects. You can filter these lots by area, and you can also search for lots near you. In this case, we can search for an address near where Kristen was looking for a lot. If you click on the lot, you get details about it, such as which agency has control over it and who's organizing there right now. Underneath the map, you can get a better view of the lot using Street View. If you click on this link, you get to see the lots page. This has basically the same details as the pop-up, but you can also see notes and add pictures.
I was talking really fast. That was a good break, right? So that little promo is actually something we made for a contest that we entered that's run by New York City. So it has a very nice, like, green thumbs, awesome. Go city agencies, you guys are doing great. It's sometimes like that, sometimes not. So take that with a grain of salt. As I said, I'm kind of just bombarding you guys with tactics, and we can try to tease that apart when I'm done doing this part. So the things that we're doing, which you've seen a little bit of, we're labeling lots. We're using a digital infrastructure to get people connected, people who are finding spaces in real life, to get people into physical space together, to take on problems, to take on design challenges, to talk about gentrification in their neighborhoods, to create durable structures and ties that might fight that. And there are 18 of these yellow dots. I took a screenshot this morning. So there are 18 places where people in Brooklyn have self-identified using our online tools that they are organizing with their communities around vacant lots that they have used our tools to find out are owned by public agencies. And of course, when we say these are lots that's vacant public land, if you kind of flip your brain around, what does that mean? Well, it's the commons, right? It also means land that was meant to be used for something, for the public good, never happened. So it just sits vacant behind fences. So kind of two different ways to think about these same physical spaces. And what we do, and what we're actually in the middle of right now trying to design an infographic about, is these two processes, right? We help people get a bunch of people in a room together and figure out all of like the hurt and the agony and the frustration of that and the process of that. And this is a public meeting about actually a different lot, which is called Myrtle Village Green. And it was supposed to be a park that was supposed to have been built by the Department of Environmental Protection about 10 years ago and never happened. And this is a meeting in a public school around the corner from there. And to take sort of all of that energy and everybody's skill sets and everybody's questions and curiosities and commitment to their new neighborhoods or their old neighborhoods and turn them into actual projects on the ground where these same people continue to work together and continue to build a civic life and to take over areas of the city that are otherwise totally unused. Kind of, I would say, like Liberty Plaza was. Those are some tactics. Those are my themes. And one thing that I want to point out, because I think it's really, really important, and then I have a little project we can do together. But if you notice, I don't work alone. I didn't make that movie. I did work with somebody to make it. I really collaboration is the key to making all of these projects move, making them go, making things move a lot faster. Then you might be able to do something by yourself. Here's a thing that I'm not working on alone. Next, one of the things that brought me to doing public space work is actually thinking about the differences in how people who live in different spaces in New York City experience the city and experience policing in the city and experience access to services, access to fresh food, to green space, and how those lines are drawn by race and by class and by community district. So in my sort of day job life, I work at a civil rights law firm, and we try to address those problems sort of after they happen, and in the rest of my life, I try to sort of create situations that might preempt those problems. And for May Day, I'm collaborating on this project, which is called Bailout New York, and we aim to provide bail for everybody who needs bail. About 14,000 people are incarcerated in New York City jails every day. That's the population if you take a snapshot. 14,000, and about 10,000 of them are pretrial detainees. Pretrial detainees means somebody who was arrested, went through the system, stood up before the judge, was charged with a crime, and the judge said, we're not sure if you're going to come back to court, give us $500 that we can hold on to for you. That's called bail. When you come back to court, you'll get that. But about 10,000 of those people didn't come up with the $500. So they have not been convicted. They are awaiting trial inside the city jails. That's about 70% of the city jail population is people who have not seen their trials at all. Bail is set based on how much money the judge decides is enough to hurt you, and most bail amounts for people in city jail are under $1,000. So it's sort of like, that's one of those things when you really think about what that means. Like, that means that day in and day out, judges are looking at people who come before them on pretty minor crimes, because if it was something major, their bail would be much more, because then you become a flight risk, right? And pretty minor crimes, and the judge says, oh, you're so poor that you and your community is not going to be able to come up with $500, or that's going to be hard for you. That's your bail. And that's most of the people who are in New York City jails. So as a movement building tactic, I've been doing some work with criminal defense support through the New York City chapter of the National Lawyers Guild for Occupy Wall Street, and specifically providing bail for people in Occupy Wall Street who are getting bail set on them in those cases, and just being in court in the middle of the night and seeing how many people really, really need it kind of tipped me to say, like, why aren't we doing this for everybody? Because we can. So we're trying to figure out the details. If anybody wants to get involved, this is an intervention. It may be a one-day project, but we are hoping that this will be the beginning of a sustained New York City bail fund. So I thought we could put in somebody's address or start a conversation. Anybody live in Brooklyn?
Who wants to put an address?
41 Madison Street.
Let's find out what that is. Oh, that looks great. Whoa, and do you see what that is? So about down the block from your house, there's a lot that looks, nice, green. It's owned by the Department of Parks and Recreation, which means that it was either supposed to have been a park, and they never built it. Small chance that it was a community garden that got registered with Green Thumb and then somehow either broke Green Thumb's regulations or got abandoned. No other options, actually. That's how things end up being owned by the Parks Department. So you've got a project there, if you want it. This could be the next couple of months of your life. And it looks pretty good, right? It looks, it looks pretty green and accessible, and you can get there from the street. 85 Madison. The neighbors look nice.
Can you comment a little bit of what the Green Thumb thing is?
The Green Thumb is a program of Parks Department and the Department of Citywide Administrative Services. They register community gardens and also provide services for community gardens. That sounds pretty good, right? They sort of have this innate conflict of interest. They have about 550 gardens already registered with them, to whom they are supposed to provide gardening support and tools and all these other things. And they have this much funding. It all comes from the federal government. And then they're also the only official mechanism for registering new gardens. They don't want to hear from you. They've got their hands full. So we've been trying to work out other mechanisms with other city agencies for letting community groups who are willing to do their own fundraising and do their own support work just get access to land quicker than going through the Green Thumb process. The Green Thumb is great. If you're a Green Thumb garden already, they will provide you with soil and with tools, and they're really trying. But it's a hard place. I'm glad I don't have that job. It seems like it kind of sucks. Somebody else want to play the address game? that was like a jackpot.
A big number of people in the audience are working right now in Sunset Park. But I guess so they don't know the address as well yet.
Any address will do. Anybody?
Can you look at intersections?
Yeah.
So like 45th Street and 5th Ave?
It's a good size up there with your. So here's the thing. So if you want to get into kind of a little bit of the process of 596 acres, we stole the city's data. We're using it we're sharing the city's data because the city doesn't. But the city's data is remarkably imperfect. So this little lot, you can actually go through to Oasis, which is a really complex system that was put together by community gardeners in the 90s that maps a lot of city databases into one place. But so here's this little lot that we just found, and it's so narrow that Google didn't take a picture of it. That's where we're at. So we don't have a picture over here because it's this tiny little strip. So one of the things that we're doing actually right now is trying to clean up the data a little bit so that only really viable properties show up. But this is a fun game. Gordon Meta Clark in the 1960s did a project called Fake Estates, where he actually bought up a whole bunch of these little tiny the places where all the zoning doesn't line up, and just documented them all as though they were his estates in New York City. I would love to see somebody grow wheat on them and see if we can make bread on the fake estates. He defaulted on the taxes on those properties, so they have reverted back to the city, so we're actually re-experiencing them all over again right now. One more address, if anybody's so brave.
39th Street between 5th and 6th, I think I saw an empty plot there, but I don't know whether it's publicly owned. There, the green dot between 3rd and Between 4th and 5th. There.
Is that that one?
There you go. Looks too small.
Yeah, that one's too small. So if you're interested in finding out specific information about specific lots, Oasis is an incredible system for doing that. You can get ownership information about any private lot. We link through to it. It's a really, really hard system to filter. And you can take a class on how to use Oasis. But also the secret to Oasis is use the address and the location report, and you will get most of what you need. If you have a specific place in mind, you can go through the Department of Buildings website for the particular property that you're looking at. I will show you something. 26 Nassau Street is Chase Manhattan Plaza. And if you look at the location report over here, this is a good tool. You can see where if anybody's entered any Department of Buildings complaints for the plaza, and you can actually read them. No? There we go. We've been complaining about the fences. That worked well. I'll stop there.
Okay, we can use Paula for answering a lot of questions that you guys might have.
I have stickers, and I don't have enough for everybody, so you only get a sticker if you ask a question. I know.
Thanks, Paula. I'll pass on microphone if you need it, but I'm not sure if you need it.
I have a question about your bailout NYC project. I'm wondering, what is the cost of keeping people in jail over a $500 bail? Like if
You know, you're the second person to ask me that question today. My inclination is never to play that money game because it implies that efficiency is what we're going for as opposed to justice. So I haven't looked that up, but that is a really good question, and we should probably find out the answer. Yeah, it's certainly more. The bail isn't. Is this on?
Yeah.
The state returns your bail, right? It's just surety money. When you show up to court, they give it back to you. So it's not, it's not money that would go into some fund for the city. So that's another. But it's a good question.
I'm just wondering, like, for incentivizing people to participate in your program, like how much money from taxpayer money is going into keeping them there over such a small fine? Or it's not even a fine, it's money that they get back.
It's a really good question.
I mean, that would be great incentive for people to participate if they know that they're paying exorbitant tax amounts because of such a silly bureaucracy, such a bureaucracy.
It's totally a good question. I don't know the answer off the top of my head, so I can't tell you. But you get a sticker anyway. You have to come up here and get it.
If you do succeed in getting the bail fund going, thank you. You will obviously get the money back, so it will essentially be an endless pool of bailout money. Do you not think that the courts will then just augment the...
There's so many reasons that this is dangerous, but those are all the reasons to do it.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
She gets a sticker.
Let's get a sticker.
Yeah.
You guys better, I have 8 left.
Maybe you said this in the beginning, but thanks. Maybe you said this in the beginning, but do you work as a lawyer too? Or is this your free time?
I work at Rankin and Taylor. I'm actually not an admitted attorney, so I work as a law clerk. because I haven't had time to put in my bar application. And I'm terrified of what that process will be like because they won't want to ask you all these questions. So I work, and at the moment I am working on a couple of civil rights cases on behalf of people who were severely injured by the police during their arrests, and putting together a class action on behalf of demonstrators who were penned in for 2 hours against their will when President Obama came to town at the end of November. Working on a couple of other things.
Yeah, no, I just wondered because, I mean, like, if you always wanted to do something that was different, I mean, obviously you're taking a different route, so I was just wondering, like, how, yeah.
Will you survive?
It is a really good question. I come talk to you guys. You pay tuition, right?
Yes. Let me give you a mic.
No, but I can. Do you have tactics for vacant building owned by the city? Because I was working on vacancy on Sunset Park, so there are a lot of vacant plot, but also a lot of building.
Have you looked at the report that Picture the Homeless just put out?
Yeah.
And so Organizing for Occupation has been looking at getting people into empty properties in partnership with Picture the Homeless. It's something you could look into. As far as city-owned buildings, it hasn't been what we've been focusing on, but if you have a project in mind, that's a thing that it's usually pretty easy on the scale of whatever, to get your city council person to use their discretionary funds to buy city property for your project. So like if you want to start a Head Start program or a community center and you have identified a city-owned building, the first place I would go is the city council person for that district and just talk to them about what happened, why is that building empty, what can they do, pitch your great idea. It's really kind of like a backdoor tactic, right? You want to get somebody in government to figure out the cheapest price that they can get that building from. That cheapest price might be free. But it's very much talk to people. So talk to the borough president's office, talk to city council. If there's an active district leader in your district, which is a party position, talk to them.
Thanks.
You wanted to ask
Yes.
something? No?
I have a series of questions for you,
Okay.
but I will try to make it very, very short. I think, within the practice that you mentioned and you explained to us, you put a lot of emphasis on the collaboration. And one of the things that caught my attention, not only because of what Killian had sort of mentioned about what you're doing now, but also about some of that article on the Village, about what you did, etc. It really I wanted to ask the question of how exactly do you organize yourselves with so much sort of disciplinary forms, really engaging in these type of projects. It's very clear that you're not a web designer. It's very clear that you're not an architect or a person working in gardening and all these type of things. So I guess my question is relating on how did you come up with the organizational form of the whole thing, right? And in which ways it has mutated and in which ways it has not functioned, and what would you consider, can be better, etc. Mostly a question of organizational form.
It's really hard, actually. I used to actually be a user interface designer about 10 years ago, which is really good training. Surprisingly, it's something I did. I have a degree in cognitive science, and I taught. Before I did all of this, I was a teacher and a teacher trainer, and I write curriculums. I still do that sometimes in different forms. I write workshop curriculums. But what I did professionally before I went to law school is I taught other teachers how to create student-centered classrooms in a language learning context or a civics learning context. So I had to really learn how to give really, really good directions, both as a user interface designer, because I am not a coder, and I am not a graphic designer for that matter, and in the context of writing curriculums, just to be able to think about things at their the smallest step. That, put the chairs in the circle before the students get there. And remember to write that down, because I'm not going to be there to put the chairs in the circle or to remind somebody to do that. And just to be really, really mindful of every gesture, especially if it needs to be repeated, and to think about sort of the energy that goes into that. And if that energy is in a place that's sustainable, and maybe it isn't. Maybe the thing that you want to do, you only get to do it once. And maybe that's the beauty of your project, is to start an idea and never repeat it, but maybe it's something awesome that other people will pick up. And that's totally fine, but if you have sort of an idea for repeatable practice, my advice is to really atomize it, to really think about what all the particular pieces are. I'm a total snoop, and I pay a lot of attention to what work my colleagues are doing and what they're enjoying. Because the easiest way to kind of pull all these projects together is to find people to do all the different pieces where the thing that they've just been asked to do is their favorite thing to do. Sometimes that means you end up doing a lot of the stuff that's nobody's favorite thing to do. It's the truth. That's how it is. So I think that is. I work with a really remarkable mapper, 596 Acres. I found him because I was invited to submit a poster to a booth at the New Ideas for the New City Festival, where I couldn't even be myself. But we did make a 596 Acres poster. It was sort of the germ that started this growth that is this project. And he saw the poster and said, hey, I could make a map of that people could click on. And we've been working together ever since, which has been a really great collaboration. I met Killian because he came to one of the 596 Acres meetings, and he said, I do design, is there a way for me to plug in? And about 6 months later, I came back to New York, and this raid had happened on Occupy in the Park. And I had been on an email list where a totally crazy sounding email that had been sent to the New York City National Lawyers Guild chapter by an expediter who works for the Department of Buildings, who pointed out these zoning violations in the first place, but wrote them in basically code. And I happened to look at that email and say, wait, I totally understand what that means. It's the middle of the night on November 15th. I can't believe I'm actually reading my email right now because I was actually answering a hotline. And I sort of put the things clicked. That Killian had said to me back in August, I want to design something. And this guy was trying really hard to describe. He was trying very hard to describe in words. Oh no, it's gone. That's a bummer.
No, try file, open, listen.
What is it?
It doesn't exist.
It's gone. Oh. So I got this email. I feel like I'm telling these stories. I don't know if they're really answering your question. But this email where this guy had been trying to describe in words the thing that could really be shown in that picture that Killian and I made. I took those photographs and then he added the lines and the red and I was looking at this block of text thinking this just needs an illustration. Like, who does this kind of work? And I had to remember that we had that conversation. So it's very fluid. It's hard to be disciplined about it. So try to imagine this in words, all caps, and about this much text, some, written in the middle of the night while the raid is going on by somebody whose job it is every day to actually help building owners and architects get their stuff approved by the Department of Buildings. And what I saw was, wow, this really needs a picture. So it's really hard to be disciplined about that stuff because you there's a lot of serendipity to it. And a lot of it is just doing whatever feels like it has to be done next.
With the 592 acres thing?
96.
Whatever. It's a number.
Has those projects that you've sort of helped start up, has that helped you engage people in other projects as well, or you keep things sort of separate? Because I imagine that if you need people to write, you sort of help people with other things. Is it really something that makes your network grow, and do you sort of use that network really for other projects as well?
I don't. It's a really good question. 596 Acres has its own internal network. There are projects that support each other. We try to have general meetings. But people come to that project with different political aims than me sometimes, and that's fine. So I try to be very careful about that. That project has its own identity and has it has its own Facebook community and its own life. And I certainly don't try to hide that I also do some very overtly political work, and people who are on that mailing list were invited to come here tonight. But I think it's actually quite. I'm struggling with this a little bit as I'm moving into a more professional identity, where I have to actually be okay, I am a person and I do these things. I think the projects do better as being things in the world by themselves.
I think Miguel mentioned that we're working in Sunset Park for our project studio this semester, and one of the issues that has come up is that New York has basically piecemealed together the new zoning laws for recent times, and Sunset Park has been in consideration for new zoning. And I'm curious, how do we find out, what the vested interests are there? Because you use zoning as a tactic in the past for Occupy Wall Street. Well, how can we use those same tactics for people in Sunset Park?
That is a really, really hard question. South Brooklyn Legal Services had one of their attorneys was working really closely with the rezoning, with the communities that were opposing the rezoning of Sunset Park. And I would start there, if I were you.
Do you have a person by chance? Sometimes that helps.
I know. If you send me an email, I will connect. The person who used to be there, her name is Meredith Jones, but she was an intern working for somebody who was working on that. If you send me an email, I could make that happen.
Will do.
And over there. Okay, and then you're next.
I just have oh god, this is so loud. I just have a sort of basic question about the map tool that you have for 596 acres, and the link that, the way that it's connected to other data about buildings and, what complaints there are. For your organization, if I'm not misunderstanding, you use this data to find out places that you can, occupy, put to different use. How else can we use this data? And what else should we be looking for when we're looking at these tools?
I'm going to throw that one back to you. What do you want to do? How do you want to change the world?
As a citizen watchdog or whatever you want to call it, what else can we be? What should we be looking for when we're using these tools? I guess this is a really basic question. Sorry.
Well, so 596 acres is a filter, basically, on an overwhelming quantity of data that New York City could share with people, doesn't share, and when it does make available, it makes it totally obtuse. So we've chosen this filter. The filter is we're looking at land that's vacant, that is city-owned. Partly the reason we're looking at city-owned land is because we think that there is some there's some necessary consistency in interacting with city agencies that communities can really benefit from us doing this over and over again. There really are only 16 agencies. That means there really are only 16 people making these decisions. I talk to them, they know me, we have nice relationships. That's helpful for people on the ground. Whereas private owners are all different. So that's a different project. Like, we didn't choose to filter our data that way because we didn't see the need in the same way. Your project might be to look at city-owned buildings. There are lots of vacant city-owned buildings. That's a great project. That's something that somebody just contacted me who wants to start a center in a community center of some sort in East Flatbush, and they're looking at a city-owned building. And you guys should probably talk to each other because you're basically going to go through the same process, and you might be able to, learn from them and maybe be able to leverage things that worked well for them. The Oasis incorporates the public register, so all property transactions are there. It incorporates zoning. It incorporates basically every piece of data you could possibly want about the city. And then the question is, do you want to change it, or do you want to make sure that things stay the way they're supposed to be? There's a lot of questions about that. One of our goals is to actually change the way the database works for the city and create a accurate use code for land that's in food production. At the moment, most city-owned land that's garden or agricultural space is marked as vacant in the city databases, which makes it vulnerable to buyouts from private developers, since New York City is a real estate speculator and does sell its vacant properties, and the databases that they have are for sale to people who might want to buy things in New York City, especially things that are vacant. So that's one thing that we'd like to change. I definitely didn't answer your question.
I'm wondering what kind of changes have you observed in the sense of belonging and identity of the people that develop this project after being able to kind of make these spaces of their own? What kind of changes have you observed?
So the projects that I've been working with are all pretty new. We did this as a pilot project this summer. We put up signs and then we put up a web page. But even so they're young, and only 2 of them are actually into their spaces physically as of right now. The project in Greenpoint, the Java Street Garden Collaborative, is actually presenting to the Parks Committee of their community board right now, and that is, as far as I can tell, a rubber stamp. So they're going to move forward, which is great. But one thing that's really changed is people are talking to their neighbors. And that's something that just doesn't happen. So, hi.
I guess this is a related question, but as a teacher, I mean, the concept of like knowing your audience, and I feel like for 596 acres and other projects, there's definitely, the people who would participate might be activists, might be people who have a sort of social justice background or investment. Someone asked me today, like, what I thought civic engagement means. How do you sort of balance your audience or the general public?
So most of the people who are engaged in 596 acres projects have never done something like this before in their lives. We are not targeting organizers or social justice workers. We're targeting people in neighborhoods where they live. And most of like the sparks that have started the project are signs. They're physical interventions. The online tools are a tool, and the online tools are great to bring organizers in, people who really understand this stuff. But the way that the entry point for most people is a sign on a lot in their neighborhood that they've always thought was being warehoused by some private developer that they then find out is owned by New York City. So there's that. And there's also a really great synergy between those people and then the people who are online cultural workers, let's call them. People who find this project because they have the drive to find this project. And that coalition is incredibly powerful. And that's something that's been really great to see. Kristen and Tia are a great example. Kristen's like the perfect gentrifier, right? She moved into this neighborhood in the middle of Bed-Stuy. It's Halsey and Lewis. It's pretty far out there. She had been volunteering with me doing some data work. Then she moved there and was like, whoa, I just did this. And so she found the lot online, and Tia grew up in the house next door. And they're doing amazing things together. Like, it's working. So that's a good balance. I just heard a good story. A friend of mine told his 9th and 10th grade after school program about this project and showed them there's a movie linked on the website that was made by the Center for Urban Pedagogy that's called The Good, the Bad, and the Empty. I think that's what it's called. And it's about vacant lots in East New York. And he showed them the film. And then it's an after-school program, and the way it's structured is like every week they get introduced to something new, and then they do something new. So he told them about this project, he showed them this film, and then he was like, so next week, here's some things we could do. And the kids all looked at him, and they were like, no, we're going to go look for vacant lots in our neighborhood next week. We're going to do this. This is what we're going to do this spring. So they did. Like yesterday, they went and looked, like visited a community garden, and they're using the map, and they're going to pick a lot that they think is good, and they're going to go forward. There's something really compelling about that you're just working physically where you live, with the people you already know.
I will ask you another question, which is related to the future of sort of modifications or, let's say, constructions that you're envisioning for 596 acres. And one of the things that is more difficult for all of us to understand, you come from a very tight and at least you know your legal background quite well. You know how to read code. You are very much aware of all sort of these tricks that are, or things that are hidden behind code by the city, etc. Most of us aren't. And there comes a moment where it's very necessary to reinterpret and to reconstruct precisely all that data into most sort of easy to understand type of things in order to push action. Yes, that's no question about it. But then there comes a moment where if you mention at this point that you had a project, what was the address that you gave her? The address that you found this little plot? 88 Madison. So finally there's a plot there. Are you archiving steps to take over? Let's say it's a 596 acres embedded or invested in providing almost not a step-by-step, but a condition of each of these own sort of the peculiarities of each of these projects, so that people can go ahead and actually learn about how to do it.
Well, so that's what we do, right? Is we kind of hold people's hands through this process. And the process is really finicky because it's not regularized. The only way that it's regularized is through Green Thumb, which is a system that's basically broken. So we're trying to teach. I'm going to show you what I did last night. You guys can't read my password, right? That's scary when you do it on the screen like that. So we have been doing, the process is different for different agencies. We get people engaged with actually calling agencies and starting the process. But it's different and complicated, and it's kind of like a choose your own adventure, but then it's also really, really simple. And so we started out just by sharing the information and have been very engaged, mostly me, very engaged with actually just walking people through it and being like, you should put up a sign on your lot saying what you're doing. Why don't you have a community meeting? Why don't you get in touch with your city council person? So we're trying to make a flow chart, and I would love to show you the draft of it because it's hilarious. But we have a little team of folks from the 596 Acres community that has been working on this. Work. This is worth it. So give me 2 seconds. Maybe I'll talk about some other things while I'm standing here trying to do this. So we've been trying to be as transparent as possible and to provide as many advocacy tools as we can. But as I said before, a lot of power is vested in people who have titles like the Commissioner for Intergovernmental Affairs for the Department of Environmental Protection. He's a nice guy named Matt Mahoney. He used to be Bloomberg's campaign manager the first time Bloomberg ran for mayor. He's in charge of all the DEP land, and he actually gets to say what happens with all the DEP land in the city. The man for North Brooklyn, his name is Jack Hammer. These people have a lot of power. Having relationships with them is actually really important. There we go. But it's not everything. Oh, why? Oh my God, I want to show you this thing so bad, it's so worth it.
Can you,
I can get to it from my computer. So generally people get in touch with us, right? Generally I get an email and then I send you like a really chatty response saying, here's all of the things that you could do.
Try opening it again. I think you have to change your. Somehow you didn't switch your account.
Oh, you're right. So we're going to do another publication, and this question that you just asked is a question everybody's been asking. Haha. There we go. And so we're trying to make this thing. Which, right? We're trying to. So you guys are the test audience. We put this together yesterday. There's a team of us working on this. I haven't seen these comments yet. Is this big enough that you can actually see it?
No.
Now it is. So we're trying to make a thing that we can actually, like we put up the maps last summer. We're trying to make a thing that we can actually stick to a lot. That kind of gives people a sense of what the steps are and how to connect with them. And then we have scripts on the website and other tools that are sort of like, here's some language you could use, and here's some answers to questions. And what we have up right now is a couple of narratives from groups from success stories. Like, here's how it went, and here's what was frustrating, and here's how long it took. They're all kind of different. But so here's, you guys are what do you guys think? Is it worth it? Should we keep working on it?
Yes.
It's kind of a pain in the ass. Making letterhead is a really good trick, by the way. If you're ever trying to do anything, make letterhead and send all of your correspondence on letterhead. I think it's on here somewhere.
Yes, because that they
Yeah, make letterhead.
they listen to it.
Yeah, they think you're real. Make letterhead, get a Facebook page. They think you're real. These are like the new ways of incorporating. Totally works. Yeah, exactly. So that's it. We'll have a little "don't get discouraged" section. If anybody wants to get involved in helping us figure out how to make this better, we can use some help.
Yeah, it seems like you have a lot of you're answering a lot of the questions and making it more clear, removing that cloud. Yeah, it needs some more.
Yeah, no. I'm really impressed that we got all the things. We did this yesterday by writing on a big mirror and a refrigerator. And then somebody did the work in the middle of the night of turning that into this, which is impressive to me.
What is your relationship to other sort of advocacy groups in New York that you've had sort of tied? It seems like you also had some form of relationship with Picture of Homeless, or?
We collaborate with Organizing for Occupation, which is
great.
sort of a big network of folks that are involved in making housing space available. Actually, so Picture the Homeless is one place where we intersect.
Right to the City Alliance.
Yeah.
Center for Urban Pedagogy. You work with all these guys, right?
The Center for Urban Pedagogy, we would love to work with them. We actually haven't quite figured out how. But they're great.
Well, they're very good at doing these type of flow charts.
But they don't do them when you need them. They do them when you enter their contest, and then like you wait 4 months, and then that's nice. But we need it now.
Yeah.
But they're great, and I think their Making Policy publications are fantastic. And if you want to look at tools that really work with an existing campaign and provide a tool that's really, really needed, they're fantastic. The street vendor one that they did, and then they did this wonderful comic book that's like for juveniles, and it's called "So You've Been Arrested," and it's everything that happens to a juvenile who goes through the criminal justice system in this really nice comic book form. They're really great. We work really closely with a little nonprofit called IOB, which stands for In Our Backyards, and they are trying to provide technical support to local greening projects and sustainability projects. What they mostly do is provide tools for grassroots fundraising. They also provide insurance to our projects. They're also our sort of ad hoc fiscal sponsor. So it's
The last tricky question before we stop it. Funding.
This is a good question. It's really hard, and you kind of have to just love it and just keep doing it. I am really trying not to have people work for free on things that are not fun. So we've had some really good luck with microfinance. Our first set of broadsheets was funded on an IOB fundraiser in a day. We won the Feast grant last month that's giving us enough money to both hire somebody to do a data cleanup, do the next round of printing, and make a next set of kind of much more beautiful fence signs. As far as operational funding, we haven't figured out how to do that yet. We're hoping that come fall we'll be able to publish a real report of all the work that we've done, because it's going really well, and look at some funding models. We apply for grants all the time. I think that we haven't been successful, but I think that that's not unusual. We've been around 5 months, 6 months, and we're really, really trying not to use free labor. So that's.
Thanks, Paul. You can go pick up your stickers.
Yeah, you guys can totally get your stickers.
Is your email address on the sticker by chance?
If you go to the web page and you click contact, which is right here, that will go to me.
Okay.
I just want you to go to our webpage because it's cool.
Already.